Hi there, I'm Linda Banfalvi. Here I am painting in my boat studio. Now, this little painting is not a plein air painting. I'm not painting directly from what I'm seeing in front of me this time, like I did with the boat painting. This one, I'm painting from my memories of a walk down by the waterfront. There was like a pier with rocks and crashing waves up onto it. I did take some photographs at the time, and that's what has inspired this little tiny painting. I just wanted to play with the idea of painting rocks and waves. This was the first one in a series of a whole bunch of them that I've done while I was on my boat over the winter time. So here we go. I've started the painting like I normally do, just putting in a warm, transparent color very thinly on top of my Arches oil paper. I'm painting on oil paper because it's a little bit more compact to travel with, and working on panels takes up more space, and I needed to be quite space conscious being on the boat. So here I am blocking in the basic rock shapes. And some of the photos that came up at the beginning of this video were some of my inspiration photos for this painting. I wanted to make this very simplistic, just painting with darks, midtones, and lights, creating movement and energy in the water. And that was my basic goal. I just wanted to see if I can capture that in a little painting. Sometimes one painting leads to ideas for other paintings. With my boat studio paintings, some of the paintings that I created over the winter are inspiring larger works that I'm doing at home in Canada in my studio. So stay tuned for some of those later on. I'm just playing with the shapes and deciding whether I like them or not, and as I progress, I modify the shapes. Where I'm creating the darkest dark along that edge, that's going to be a focal area. And so I'm just trying to balance that dark with some other darks in the rocks. This is all very transparent right now, and then I will introduce some opaque colors over top. I'm getting right into the water block in. I'm using a fairly dark value of greens. I think I'm using a combination of blues with the Indian yellow of the base. So it has a bit of a green tinge and a little of that brown color that I'm using to tone down the blue. But I wanted a darker value over top, and there's a little bit of that yellow peeking through here and there. This is just the base color of the water, and then I'm going to create some movement and wave action with some lighter values on top of this. Painting wet and wet a la prima with oil and cold wax medium. I like the way the cold wax allows you to layer the paint to create the textures that I like. The cold wax also helps to speed up the dry time of the paintings, which I like, especially when painting out, traveling and that sort of thing. By the second day, it's already touch dry, and after a few days, I can pack it away in my studio already. Depending on how thick I apply the paint, of course. Sometimes I'll wait a week or so before I pack it away. I do have this nice little contraption that I created for traveling, a little box that can dry the paintings. I bought a plastic milk box and made dividers in there with some picture wire, so I could fit probably half a dozen paintings at one time, maybe 8. I just tape the back of my painting panel, like I have the paper taped onto a piece of plastic heater board. I slip it into my dry box, and it's sitting in the boat studio just to the right of my easel. I leave the paintings to dry there for a while before I bring them into the cabin where I have my painting briefcase kind of thing. Anyways, that's just gives you a little bit of information of how I work it with the traveling and painting on paper. As I've been talking, I added a middle light value to the rocks just to add a little dimension to the rocks. And now I'm modifying the green water with more of a blue. It's still in a darker value. I just wanted some blue-green water. And then I'm adding in a light blue over top of this. I'm just dragging it across and creating some texture, the illusion of some waves. It's a close-up cropped image of the rocks with some water behind it. I don't have any sky in this painting. I wanted to focus on just the water coming in behind the rocks, and then you'll see that I will paint the waves crashing up onto the rocks. Just playing with the edges now, making some interesting little marks, softening some edges. And some of the same color that I've been put into the background where the water is, I'm bringing that forward into the rocks too, because there might be some water that's splashed over, some reflection from the sky. Usually what's in the sky reflects in the water, and it also reflects off of wet surfaces. So I'm just trying to balance some of those blue colors into the foreground. What's in the positive shape should be in the negative space, and vice versa. I'm just playing back and forth between the lights and creating some textured layers. These rocks were quite rough rocks, and they had weird little shapes. So just having some fun playing around with that. Carving down with the lightest light value, and I'm tucking it in behind the dark. And then I'll modify that shape with the light as well. So it's trying to create the illusion of waves crashing up against the dark shapes of the rocks. And of course, the water shape, that's all still wet paint. So as I'm adding the light color, I'm mixing some of those colors to get some variety of blues, lights, and dark blues. And it just creates a little bit of movement in there. I'm just lightly touching over the surface as I'm making my wave splashing. There, now I'm just modifying that down a little bit so the water is, you can see that some of the rock is covered with water, and I just, with the light against the dark, you can change the shape of the rock a bit. I just make that light value pattern flow across that rock shape from one side of the painting to the other, and then I'm connecting down into the foreground of the rocks. And I'll do something and then I don't like it and I scrape it out and put another color over top. I have paint on one end of my scraper there, so I use the opposite end just to scrape out a little bit of paint that I put on there that I didn't want. I think this painting, I did the whole painting, if I recall correctly. I think I did the whole painting with just the scraper. I spent a lot of time walking on the beach over the winter and listening to the waves crashing and photographing waves. There was a rocky pier that you could walk out, and the same thing. I just really enjoyed watching the movement of the water. It looked different every time you go, depending on what time of day it was and how the light was hitting and how rough or calm the ocean was at the time. I'm just modifying the darks again, and we're getting closer to the end of this little painting session. This was just a quick little sketch to have ideas of what for other paintings, trying on different color combinations. I'm adding a sort of a middle value brown, that like the rocks were quite brown, but where they were wet, they were dark. And so where I put some lights, I found it was just a little bit too light, so I modified it with some more middle value warm neutral on top. And I like that with the blue notes that are in there as well. So I think that the basic shapes that are here, I'm just trying to modify them so they don't look like baked potatoes on the shore with some angular shapes and things like that, adding in a few things. I think that it's said what I was trying to say, and I feel like there is some energy in this painting with the way the water's crashing on the rocks. So I felt that it was fairly successful, just maybe not one of my best paintings in the universe, but it was fun to do, and it kick-started my creative juices to continue with this theme. And like I said, I don't know, I must have done at least a dozen more seascape type paintings inspired from this first, not just this painting, but from just getting started on a theme. And I figured since I was down south and in warm weather that I might as well make use of being there and paint what was around me and what was interesting me. I felt like I needed to liven up the water a little bit here with more of a turquoise light value, and it gave a little bit more dimension to the water. So there was some cool blues, and this is a little bit more of a warmer blue maybe. I don't know how to... There's a bit more yellow in this blue and a lighter value. I still wanted some texture in the back, but I didn't want it competing too much with the crashing part of the waves. Oh, and look, I love the way that texture was brought out by that color. So there you have, I'm painting crashing waves onto the rocks. I hope you enjoyed this, and stay tuned for more on my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me.